buy that actually. I think there is some like, here's the thing. There's some that is true. She does say that.
Ooh, Joshua's here.
Oh,
Josh is here. Everybody's just popping on before they're allowed.
No, I'm coordinating behind the scenes.
Oh, you're
I was
coordinating
told to
behind
pop on.
I'm a
Wait,
producer.
okay. Do you want? But Griscom's got to do his gem thing, and then we'll.
Well, Joshua can be here for that. Cool.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, Joshua Kahn Russell is the executive director of the Wildfire Project. He's an amazing member of our community, and we're going to talk to him in a few minutes. But first, David Griscom has an extremely enlightening and positive, and inspiring and non-stress inducing, and can I just say again, optimistic view of the economy for us. And by the way, and listen, smartass, why don't you do a Warren impression? This is a good time to.
Oh, I can't do any impressions.
Well, why don't you do it? Here's the thing.
All my impressions, every time I do an impression, I just do a baby voice. I've realized that that's the only thing I can do for anybody.
Pass on that. Matt, can you do a Warren?
No, I do it. I do it similar to yours, I think, actually.
Yeah, but
I don't know. The matriarchs are getting really concerned that I should really twist the knife into Bernie's back.
Yeah, the matriarchs in my Native American community were really tired of how Bernie talked with his hands, so we decided to twist a knife in him. All right, play a few minutes of the new TMBS intro music for Griscom to get him into his gem.
Oh, new. Okay, 1 second.
What do we? I really like it. I like this new music from Napoleon the Legend.
Dude, he's the man.
He is the man.
All right, here we go.
Let's get some jams. All right.
Yeah, that's great.
You ready for this?
Thank you.
No, this, obviously we're learning a lot about our system very quickly. And I think a lot of people are realizing just how unstable global capitalism is. Even just in the past couple of days, I mean, we've seen the complete collapse of the stock market. And, who knows? I mean, there's already been a couple rebounds, but the amount of value that's been lost has just been exceptional. And it shows how unstable capitalism is. And I just wanted to hit on a very specific thing and sort of broaden out from that. So what we're going to see over the next couple of weeks is we're going to see a tension that comes from something that has dominated our production systems for a very long time, which is called, just-in-time supply chains. So that means, it's a supply chain for people who don't know, that's all of the steps that go into making a commodity. And it's actually a lot more complicated than you think. I mean, Wolf talks about this a lot, and a lot of Marxist economists really say that it's difficult actually to do a complete supply chain because so many hands go into the work, so much labor goes into the finished product, that the consumer good that you have, that to trace that back, I mean, it really just becomes exponential very quickly. But the just-in-time supply chain has become very much dominant throughout globalization, which basically that means that, things are getting shipped into a factory, parts, for example, are getting shipped into a factory just right before they're going to be used. They're not really stockpiling or warehousing anything. And that works in some level when, conditions are normal and good. But as we find that life does not work out that way, and capitalism is always, the funny thing about capitalism is it's probably one of the most optimistic systems, or a system that is constantly on the verge of collapse. They always like, oh, it's never going to happen again. This time we've actually figured out.
I think the Fed chair said a couple of months ago that we were never going to have another recession.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, exactly. That's the kind of attitude. So what happened is not only do we have this, very tight, basically, supply chain, but it's become expanded all across the globe. And because so many different firms and organizations are a part of that supply chain, it can be very hard for, if there's a factory on one end that's starting to realize it's actually our shipments are all coming in late and that's delaying our ability to, to produce. It can take them a little bit of time to go down the supply chain to actually, figure out where the problem is. And obviously, with all the stress that's been put on China, we've already started to see some of the tensions in the global system because of the fact that so many Chinese factories have been shuttered and we're so reliant on Chinese labor, and the fact that now a lot of shipping companies aren't able to go into Chinese ports. So even if the goods are there, we're not able to ship them. So in the next couple of weeks, and more specifically in the next couple of months, there will be a lot of interruptions to our system, especially with complicated goods, in technology, cell phones, computers, and things like that. And those are obviously are second level when we're talking about a crisis. But what we're looking at right now is also the reality that the United States, our domestic capacity for producing things like face masks, ventilators for people is very much limited. I mean, New York City has no capacity, for example, and this is a city that is being very hard hit with this. We have no capacity to produce these things on our own. So we're very much reliant on these global production systems that are so unstable. And so this happened because capitalism puts profit over stability. Capitalism puts profit over safety. And I just want to make the point, and this is the optimistic part of the gem, actually, Michael.
Okay,
That,
ready
you
for
know,
optimism.
we need to be able to start demanding that we should have much more say in our economy. And this is something, we're going to have a lot of arguments for why the system doesn't work over the next couple of weeks, over the next couple of months. But this is one of the points that we need to be hitting with people is like, well, it's not just that we have problems, but we also have solutions. And if as a democratic society, we could find ways to have more local production. Now, I'm not supporting localism. And if, for people who aren't familiar with that, that was a very big economic idea that, the problem with capitalism, the reason it's so exploitative, especially now, is because of globalization, right? Because it's such a wasteful system. And it's definitely true that, globalization and the exploitation of labor around the world is a huge problem. But, if you just shrink the size of capitalism, that doesn't get rid of the problems. Capitalism has always been a system about exploitation. But at the same time, I do think that it would be reasonable for us, especially in big municipalities in areas, to say we should actually set a certain limit of things that are being produced within our area, so that when we come into these shortages and crises, we're not sort of strapped and sitting here wondering what the hell, how are we going to get food into the city? How are we going to get the medical equipment? I mean, it's absolutely reasonable. And also it's very important too, to be able to have more, local industry, so that we don't have what we have now, where we have a complete separation for most people and the actual production of the consumer goods. The United States right now, around 16 million people are working in the service economy, and the service economy was one of the fastest growing industries in the United States after the financial crisis of 2008. And we're seeing how those jobs, those are jobs that are some of the lowest paying in the country. They have the worst benefits and the lowest rates of unionization, and also very high turnover, right? So we're seeing the problems when we've actually, in the United States specifically, when the working class and a lot of lower middle class people have actually had to make this hard pivot to just service work, basically, to keep afloat. But that's not a system that actually has a lot of stability in it. So, we need to, being able to start demand that what, we actually shouldn't live in a system where a few people in search of their own short-term profit should be able to make economic decisions that put us all at risk. It's not just the exploitation, which is a huge thing, but it's also the fundamental risk of capitalism, that is a decision that is made by a few people. There's the stability that we're seeing now, the inability for us to get goods that are needed, and the environmental devastation that we're seeing, cheap products. I mean, look at an organization like IKEA, which is dominated. It's true that we all sort of purchase these goods, and they are completely disposable, and they're very wasteful. And we should be able to have a lot more say in that, especially in a situation where we're probably going to be seeing more crisis because of the environmental devastation that we've done. I mean, the sad thing, the scary thing, honestly, about the coronavirus is that pandemics are going to be much more likely to happen in this kind of environmental crisis that we're living through, right? Because you see, higher rates of infection in animals, and those kind of animal to human transfers of viruses. You see a lot of devastation of, environments. So then animals actually migrate out of them, which means that if they have some infection, those infections actually are going to be spreading across larger populations. Anyways, these are all results of the decisions of the people in control of our economic system. And we need to be making the argument that, what, it's not fair, it's not safe, and it's not rational to leave the control of our economy in the hands of the few. We need to be demanding short-term protections for people who are threatened by this quarantine. That means, low wage workers. That means people in service industries, but also everybody is definitely going to need more and more support. So we need a larger role for the community. We need a larger role for us as a democratic society, and we can no longer live in a society, in a global environment where profit is put over stability, profit is put over people, profit is put over everything. I mean, this is a wake-up call for everybody, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Just two quick things before we go to Joshua. I think the terminology of globally interdependent, nationally empowered, and locally resilient, interesting, starts to cover like the idea of having real dynamic global solidarity, all the things we want. A very connected world, a world where it's very easy for people to move and interface and build bridges with each other across all possible boundaries. There's also just no realistic and real way in which, modern, like in our modern conditions, we actually need a strong state that delivers certain services like healthcare, like transportation, like housing. And then, we also, that element of scaling up things like community supported agriculture, local group. I mean, this stuff.
That's the biggest thing too. Our food.
It's really important, and our food supply is totally insecure.
It's not even just insecure; it's just ridiculous.
And it's ridiculous.
The amount of waste that goes into shipping food around the globe, and that there's parts of the country that are food insecure, but yet they actually are like some of the largest food growers in the country and in the globe. I mean, and especially in so I didn't mean to cut you off, but also like in South America and a lot of parts of the world, you see cash crops like soy, right, dominate environments where actually like these communities have the capacity to provide food for their for people, but it's actually just being shipped off to the United States or to China or to wherever. I mean, it's just a completely incoherent.
I mean, it goes right. I mean, literally, it's Irish potato famine.
Yes,
orders of magnitude, and that's a conscious market decision. It's a conscious capital decision. Also, did you guys see that fake news satirical article I sent you where it was Elizabeth Warren came up with a corona vaccine but won't share it because she doesn't make emojis?
So good.
Yeah, I just wanted to button it with that.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.